So that was the emotional roller coaster. I was considering, oh, no one would even know that I'm not turning up. So I don't have the pressure. Well, Tom's not there. I could just just not do it. And then I said, why? You've trained, you're prepared, your bike is there, it's all packed. You have all the bags there, you have the food, you have everything ready. So there's no point in not going. Of course you can do it. Just trust in yourself. And again, at that day, like retrospectively, it's just the worst and the biggest mountain is just in yourself. It's in your head. It's not in your legs. It's not in the bike. It's just in your head. And once you just get there, everything will turn out fine.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest for today's Seek Travel Ride podcast, Stevie Gaebe. I first met Stevie during the Normandicat 900 Ultracycling event in northern France. We'd both lined up at the start line. We were both nervous of what would unfold over the course of the next 3 days. Surrounded by men, we were also some of the only women who turned up to challenge themselves in this self-supported long-distance event. We would end up riding together for the first few hours, and as I learnt more about Stevie, I knew her story was one that needed sharing. Stevie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bella, so good to see you again and hear you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for saying yes. Stevie, I feel like the show today is a special treat almost for me because I'm really excited to dig in a little bit more to some of the stories that I got some insights to during those crazy few hours in Normandicat.
Oh, yeah. It was so good that you asked me because that actually led me to just like living through all these 3 days again. And it was just amazing to dig into that adventure again. So thanks very much for that treatment.
It really is an intense period of time. I know personally that for myself, I've never been more alert and of all my senses than I was during that event, even though I was extremely tired, especially, and I went through the emotional roller coaster. But it was one of those things, especially at nighttime and especially on that first night, I was just aware of everything. But Stevie, we've got all the time to talk about Normandicat. First and foremost, an important question that I ask all of my guests: can you remember the very first bike you rode?
Yes, I actually do. It was a children's bike. It was yellow and it had got training wheels. So I think I was about probably 5 or so when I think I got it for Easter. And that was my first bike. So I've, well, more or less ridden a bike all the time I can remember.
Wow. So I was going to say, because something that comes up for some of my guests is some guests start riding a bicycle and never stop all the way through to adulthood. Some guests start riding a bicycle but then stop riding a bike and then rediscover the joy of cycling. Did you cycle from a child all the time? Like, have you always ridden a bike?
Well, I think I need to say that my mom stopped driving a car and my father was working. So every time we wanted to go somewhere, it would either walk, and I hated walk. I really detested walking somewhere. So we went by bike, and I went to school by bike. We went to like swimming pools. We went to like whatever on the weekends. We went there by bike. So that was fine. It was my way of transportation. I was living like in the south of Frankfurt, and we had everything like in cycling distance. So my school was maybe 3 kilometers away. Swimming pool was maybe 8 kilometers away. So yeah, that was perfect cycling distances.
Wow. And so cycle commuting then was something sort of active travel for incidental getting from A to B, from home to the shops or home to school, home to work. That's been a part of your life since you were a child then?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like actually the public transport from the place I was living to school was just useless. So there was no public transport. So I could have walked that would have taken me 20 minutes, or I could have gone by bike, which I did, and that only took me 10 minutes. So I could sleep 10 minutes longer. So naturally, I went by bike. So, well, regardless if it rained or if the sun was shining, I went by bike. Yeah.
And I guess just growing up with those habits has led into adulthood where the weather doesn't necessarily get in the way for you to go out and cycle. Like, although maybe in wintertime when it's a bit not so pleasant.
Yeah. Actually, I really didn't like, well, I'm not that any weather cycling person. I really don't like to go outside when it's pouring. But like if I have to, I still go. I may consider staying at home then if it's pouring or if it's like icy or something like that. And well, after a certain time, I used to drive a car as well, so my transportation wasn't limited to the cycling. But then nowadays, I try to cycle also for ecological reasons and leave the car at home.
I love it. That speaks straight to my heart there. I'm right there with you. I feel like cycling and active travel, especially for people who enjoy cycling anyway, it just feels like a natural thing to do. And if you're somewhere where it's feasible for you, the more that we do it, the better it will be, and the better for our environment and our futures as well.
Oh yeah.
So, Stevie, can you just quickly, just a brief introduction about yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, well, I live in, well, I've got actually two places I live. One place is more or less my during the week place, which is in Frankfurt. And on the weekends, we stay outside because my husband's got a house 50K away from Frankfurt. And when we go into the office, we spend the time in Frankfurt. These are the two places I live. And well, before the pandemic, when we got to the office more often than we nowadays do, I used to cycle sometimes. So I had to get up very early, like leave home at 6. I'm not a morning person, I have to say. You asked me to talk about myself. Yeah, I'm not a morning person.
Oh no, no.
But
Are you a coffee in the morning
oh,
person?
definitely. Oh yeah, and like coming back to the Normandicat, I'm a coffee around the clock person then.
Whatever gets you through.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but like I do well most of the time. Well, or my favorite sport is cycling, and yeah, well I've bought myself a road bike. I think that was back in 2012 or 2013. And actually, I just said to myself, okay, I need to find a good hobby again. I wasn't cycling that much. I was cycling from A to B, but not like cycling as a sport. So I thought, okay, will I get a mountain bike? No, mountains are not, well, we do have mountains, but it's rather hills than mountains. And then I thought, okay, most of the people I know who are doing cycling, they do road biking. So I bought myself a road bike, and yeah, that was probably the groundstone of the rest to come.
Wow. So we've obviously talked about the fact that you've commuted by bike since you were a child, and then you obviously rediscovered cycling as a sport, almost 10 years ago now. What about athletics and sports in general? Did you grow up feeling like an outdoors person? Were you particularly sporty as a child?
Well, I've tried a lot of things from ballet to swimming to I think the main sport was then became horse riding. I did tons of tournaments in dressage. That was actually later. That was in my 20s. But like as a teeny, I tried anything like gymnastics. I'm absolutely not talented for gymnastics or ballet or something like that. Handball was too tough, and I didn't do that much of sport besides swimming. And I sort of rediscovered that later when I was, yeah, thinking of becoming more sporty and especially balancing my, how would you say that? I like to eat. So you need to find a way to get rid of, well, what you eat to stay fit. And yeah, I thought that cycling is really good for that.
Although with moving towards ultra endurance cycling and long distance cycling, it's not so much, a way to eat. You need to learn how to be able to eat quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's eating nonstop, but I like that. Especially in France, by the way.
Oh no, you're speaking to the converted there. Daughter of a Greek mother, there was never a lack of food in my household that was offered to me on a plate every minute of the day, pretty much. So Stevie, I mean, you've got such a diverse range of sports that you were in, but then rediscovering cycling, 10 years ago, did taking cycling up and moving from just commuting to work by bike to then this is the sport that I'm going to participate in, what was that like? Was that a aha moment? Was it, how did that feel to shift it from transport to fitness, for example, or sport?
That actually came with actually two things. One thing was that friends of mine, they used to go to Mallorca early in the year, like beginning of March, for training camp. They weren't like tournament people or events people. They just like to cycle. But then we bunched up in a whole big group then with touring guides taking us around, planning the trips, doing longer distances. And I was doing that a few times, well, a few years in a row. And that actually also, like, that really brought me into it. Also, it really changed my view on Mallorca. I was thinking of, oh no, I don't want to go to Mallorca. It's all that Ballermann stuff, party and drinking stuff. And it's not like that.
Dance parties and
Yeah. Yeah, well, drinking from buckets with a straw, that was everything I could think of when I heard about Mallorca. But it's got its lovely villages and the Tramontana Mountains. It's so nice. So that was one thing. And then I have a friend of mine, and she was doing that with her boyfriend. She was well visiting Mallorca a few times, and she was doing these well marathons, these one-day tournament events. And I was thinking, oh my God, how can she do that? How can she go like to over 200K in a day? It's just such a useless spend of time. But like after a few years of cycling and getting into it, I thought to myself, okay, why not try a marathon? But that actually that was how would you say that? It took a while before I was actually confident enough to do that because I never thought when I was on a bike, I never thought I could ride 100K in one day, not even doing mountains and doing 100 or more K a day. So yeah, that took a few years until I was confident enough to do my first the Bodensee Radmarathon, the marathon around the Lake Constance. That was my first ultra event,
what distance was that?
220K, and that goes through three countries. So it starts in, well, it's actually a few starting points. You can choose wherever you want to start from. I think it's about 7 or 8 starting points. And we started in Germany, then went through Austria, then went to Switzerland and back to Germany again. So more or less around the lake.
Is it a big event? Do a lot of people participate in this event?
Oh, yeah. It's quite a common marathon because it's meant to be sort of more flat. It's only got, in inverted commas, only, I think, 1,000 meters of altitude. And so it's more an easy one. It's not the crazy Alps thing. So it should be an easy one. And a colleague of mine told me about that, and I said to myself, "Oh, why not do that? Why not try it?" And then I found a few friends who also wanted to go there, so we did it together. And yeah, that was my first marathon.
So you took a while to convince yourself to sign up for this event, to build up the belief that you could do it, and you got yourself to the start line. You finished the event. What are you thinking at the finish line about those type of events in general? Then
Actually, I always need some starting point to get the momentum going. But once I get into the movement, I keep moving. And I think the worst thing or that the biggest hurdles are actually in your head. They're not in your body, they're in your head. And well, thinking of not being able to cope with something like that is a huge barrier, but it's only in you. Your body is able to do a lot more than you think before actually getting into it. So, and I thought to myself, okay, I can do it. I can do others. I can do harder ones, marathons with more altitude meters, and yeah, that was a good thing.
And so then you finished that event feeling energized by it, realizing what you could achieve. It wasn't a case that, okay, I never want to do that to myself again. You actually were like, wow, I can do this. I want to do more.
Exactly. The funny thing was when we headed off early in the morning, it was pouring rain, so it wasn't the best weather to start your first marathon, but but it stopped raining after an hour or two. But my feet were still wet when I finished it, and they were so white, and they just looked like the feet of a deaf person, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was a fun fact. Then I actually took pictures of my feet, posting them on Facebook.
It's one of the bizarre things where our photo albums on our phones remind us of these things, or Facebook memories, and it's like, oh, here's a picture of this. It's like, oh, that's definitely not my best side.
But I keep laughing every time I see these pictures again of my white feet.
So you were participating in, and I guess for the benefit of our listeners, when Stevie talks about marathons, really, like, I know as an Australian we would call those events sort of ultra distance or grand fondo sort of cycling events as well. So but Stevie, you have run a marathon, as in running as well, because am I correct? You have participated and you are an Ironman.
Yeah,
Where did that come in? So you bought your first road bike 10 years ago. You built up the confidence to participate in long distance cycling events.
yeah,
Where did adding swimming and running and cycling together come into it?
yeah. That was actually by coincidence. I had a colleague signing up into the Fuschel triathlon, swimming in the lake of Fuschel. It's in Austria, in near Salzburg. So it's 500 meters of swimming in an ice cold lake. Then it's driving around the lake, 25K, and then another 5K of running. So that was my first one. But again, the same happened. I thought up front I could never do a triathlon. I'm just not fit enough. I'm just not confident enough. And then I thought, okay, it's possible. I can do it. So I can also do longer ones. And yeah, then I did a Olympic triathlon in Frankfurt. Then I went to middle distance, and then at some stage, I met my future husband, and he was into triathlon as well. And so the idea was born to do an Ironman together, and we did that together. A little delayed because of that 3 years of pandemic. That was just happening, but we did it. We went to Switzerland and did the Ironman in Switzerland in the city of Thun.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. Training for an Ironman is also next level as well. I know training for an ultra cycling event is next level, but I feel Ironman, because there's 3 disciplines that you're training for, it's
Yeah,
how did you fit that into your busy career?
actually, it wasn't that hard because the training, most of the period we were into the preparation was during the pandemic, and I had a running trainer, and she gave me a training plan, and that helped me just so much to give a structure to that pandemic situation where you weren't able to meet people or that many people, sort of a lockdown situation, but we could still go outside. So it wasn't that strict in Germany, or at least not here near Frankfurt where we live. So you could still go outside. And having that structure of 3 to 4 runs a week, that helped me so much to keep going. And same then with the cycling. I didn't need a training plan, or at least I thought I don't need a training plan. I just cycled as much as I could and as long as I could. So it just it wasn't that hard actually.
What about the swimming? Because you mentioned there one of the first triathlons you did. It was swimming in a very, very cold open water like lake.
Yeah.
I'm imagining, and perhaps I'm wrong, because I've not been to this part of Switzerland before. But what was the water temperature that you were facing for the Ironman that you had signed up for?
I had the feeling I was swimming through ice cubes.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. So the Lake of Thun, it's situated in the center of Switzerland, and you can actually see Eiger, Mönch, and Jungfrau, these three famous mountain peaks from the lake. But it's got glacier water in it. So the water is really, really cold. And like when we arrived a few days before the event took place, and we did go for a swim in the lake, and I was wearing my normal swimming goggles, and there was just a thought, just a little piece of skin between my swimming cap and the goggles. And do you know when you eat ice cream or drink cold drinks and you drink too quick and you get a real sore head?
Brain freeze.
Yeah, it was just I was getting a serious brain freeze from the water. So the next time I went into the lake, I got a bigger goggle and I went with two swimming caps, and then it was okay. So I didn't leave any skin exposed to the water, and then it was fine. And that was actually also my trick for the race on a Sunday morning. Actually, I need to tell you that because it's really nice. When you're in the water, it's still dark. It was beginning of September, so we didn't have these long days anymore. So it was dark. All these black people standing there in their wetsuits. So quite a funny sight actually. And then we went into the water. It was still sort of dark. It got lighter, and then the sun came up, and it was just like bringing one mountain after another one to sunlight. That was just like so amazing in the water, in the swim, and that motivated to keep me going. And it was a fantastic experience. Also, like the cycling was very nice. It was much warmer than we expected. Well, first when we came there, we thought of what to wear. And on the day of the race, beginning of September, we was more or less thinking of what not to wear, what to take off. So it was really hot.
So you went from one extreme of ice cold swimming through ice cubes in the lake to then all of a sudden during the day the sun's out. It's greeted you with a
Yeah.
glorious day, obviously, and it's too hot. But going back to that sunrise moment, I just feel that's so energizing when you're actually up and active at that time of the day. It's golden hour, magic hour. You hear the birds tweeting. You know, the earth is sort of going, hey, here's our little present to you for enjoying yourself at this time.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how I view it in my mind. But I've just got this image, Stevie, of this amazing, beautiful, warm golden light just bathing those beautiful, majestic, giant peaks coming out of the water and being greeted by that. Wow. How could you not be uplifted, right?
Yeah. And actually that these moments I really, really like, even though I'm not a morning person, these are the moments that reward you so much of getting up early. I love sunrises. And it's all so fresh and quiet, and I like the solitude of that moment of, yeah, the sunrise.
I've never regretted getting up early when I've been facing the sunrise. I remember a tip someone once told me: the hardest part of deciding to train in the morning is putting your socks on to go and train in the morning. And it's so true. Once you've
Yeah.
made that decision and you're up and at it, it can be a bit unpleasant at first, but it's always generally rewarding. Unless you're riding in pouring rain, in which case maybe you need your head checked, but or you're just really committed. One or the
Yeah.
other. One or the other. Or you're meeting someone else and both of you don't want to pull out. That has happened to me on more than one occasion. And I'm sure I have a friend who'll be hearing this and be grinning because I know exactly who they are. But anyway, I digress. So You finished the Ironman. Because that finishes with a marathon run, correct?
It does.
How was that?
Awful. It was really hard because it was hot. I wasn't well, I couldn't eat during I wasn't even hungry. And I think what really kept me going was some salty stuff was given to you on the running course. But like it was 3 rounds. The first round was like, oh, can I really do that? Is my stomach all right? Do I need to, well, vomit or something? I was really not feeling well at all. And I was drinking, I don't know the English word for that. It's like soup. It's normally hot and you put like pasta noodles into it.
Like a broth.
Yeah, it's a broth gonna. Yeah, exactly. This is the word. And that made me survive the marathon because of the salt and even it was warm, but it was hot outside and it was just like what that was the best thing I could have done. I could have had. So I was really thankful of having that.
I can only imagine having to deal with sort of stomach issues and from a nutrition point of view when you are at your body's physical limits and testing yourself to such an enormous level. I can only imagine how draining that would be to feel that type of sickness. So thank goodness for noodle soup, noodle broth. So glad you got that salt fix into you. I wonder then, what was it like crossing that finish line? Because you would have felt empty, but
Yeah, it was really emotional because it wasn't planned, but at some stage you were like when you did these 3 courses, I knew because I met Tom then, my husband, I met Tom when we were just like crossing each other. And so we knew somehow where the other one was. And he knew at the end, he was little before me, but he got slower and slower. It wasn't his day of running. And he actually waited for me for 2 minutes, and then we crossed the finish line together at around 13 hours. And that was really lovely. I was so thankful of him to wait for me and not doing the thing on his own. And then when we were crossing when we were crossing the finish line together, the guys asked us, "Hey, are you married?" No, we were engaged at that time. And then he said, "Okay, but now something needs to happen. You need to ask her now." We're just
they
looking at
want to
each other.
set the moment up.
No,
They want to set the moment up. They're like, no, we've already got plans. This is our
yeah,
moment.
it's all
Crossing.
sorted. Don't worry, we're engaged. So that was really funny.
Do you have a finish line photo of both of you crossing the line together then? That would be such an awesome moment to share.
Yeah, we have. We actually bought these professional pictures that are made by professional photographers. So yeah, we have lots of pictures.
What a great moment. And actually, part of that too, because when your significant other is training for the same event that you are, you share the same passion. So I'm guessing, like, even leading up into training, when perhaps one of you is feeling less enthusiastic about heading out for training that week, the other one can help support as well. You're like a good tandem team of two that way.
Oh yeah, definitely. He's more the running lover, and I'm more the cycling lover. Or at least that was the situation when we met and when we trained. I need to say he really didn't like long rides, and with long rides I mean rides over 100K. And we had some serious discussions of why. Well, because I always wanted to go longer, and he said, "Oh, where's the point in doing more than 100K? It's boring. I don't like it." And at some stage, we just found out that he wasn't well nutritioned, so he just started eating much more. So we did more coffee and cake breaks.
You live in a country that's famous for its great cakes, by the way. I've not been to Germany before, but I definitely know that top of my list is to head and get German cake.
Yeah, you're well invited anytime you want to come over.
I'll treat you to French pastries and I'll have some German Black Forest cake.
That's a deal.
Love it, love it. This is Stevie Ironman. Was that 2021?
Yes.
So I know that Normandicat. I know it was at the end of May in 2022. and you did Ironman in September 2021. Was Normandicat even on the agenda before Ironman existed? Like, was ultracycling something you were thinking about?
Well, not in the form of events, I would say. That also came a little bit with the pandemic. So you couldn't go anywhere, everything was closed, and you needed to do something. And that's when we started our mini adventures. We watched some videos, especially videos of Jonas Deichmann, probably, well, the best known triathlon guy with his triathlon around the world by now. But he inspired us a lot with these long cycling things, these epic Cape to Cape rides and all, and bivvying outside. And so we thought to ourselves, why not do it ourselves? We need to do something. So we started out with these mini adventures, just getting the sleeping bag out, sitting on the bike, going somewhere, finding a place to sleep, and then go back the next day. And then actually Tom came up with the idea of doing a smaller ultra cycling event. We didn't want to start with a transcontinental race or something like that. So just something more achievable. And so that's why we actually signed up for the Normandicat together.
I'm interested actually in how you even learnt about Normandicat, because I say this as someone who also signed up for that event, and I was in France literally looking for similar to you. I knew I wanted to challenge myself in this ultra cycling space, but I didn't want to necessarily go right in at the deep end. I wanted to test the waters, and it's I didn't know this event existed before then. I'd never heard of it. And I'm even struggling to think about where I found it on a Google search. I'm not sure. But how did you learn about Normandicat?
Yeah, sort of the same. So we thought if we want to combine that with a holiday so we can go somewhere, it doesn't necessarily have to be in Germany or close by. So we Googled events in France, Belgium, in the Netherlands. And then we suddenly then came up with the Normandicat and thought this would be the perfect event, very small, very unknown, very quiet, and not just like a competition, but more just like a touristy ride, if you will, and also in a nice area.
Definitely. I know for myself personally, when I saw a list of possible events that I could choose, Normandy holds a real dear spot to me in my heart, because it was the place when the pandemic hit. My husband and I, we were halfway into our international move, in that our move from Australia to France was our end goal, but we ended up in limbo in Dublin for a lot longer than we thought. Initially, we were going to be there for a few months, and we were there for 18. But when we finally had the way paved forward to get to France, we decided we would cycle tour, and we arrived in Cherbourg in Normandy. So Normandy for me just had that feeling of freedom, if that makes sense. And I know that when I saw an event in Normandy, I just thought, oh, that's where I need to go because I'm happy there. So it's interesting because looking back on it now, when you say it looked like a touristy event, I could think of other ways that I would describe that event now, having done it, that don't include the word touristy at all.
Yeah, well, retrospectively, I totally agree to your view.
I learned a lot about that department.
Hi everyone, it's Bella here. Just wanted to say, if you're enjoying what you're listening to so far and liking the podcast, could you please go into your podcast player app and give it a rating and a review? It really helps the podcast to grow and reach a wider audience. Thank you so much. Now, back to the show.
But actually, before we go into the details of it, I know all about Normandicat, but I know that it's not a lot of information out there on the internet. So could you give a recap to our listeners of exactly what the event entails?
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah, so the Normandicat is a cycling event with approximately 900k without assistance, total autonomy. So you're given 8 checkpoints, you're given the GPS coordinates, and you need to plan your route around these checkpoints. Every time you reach a checkpoint, you just do a photo of yourself and you send the picture to the organizer of the race. It starts at Blainville, that is near the town of Caen in France, and it's actually more or less a circle course from there to Paris, back to the coast, then all the way up to Cherbourg and back to Caen. So you can go clockwise, you can go anti-clockwise. The only thing that they advise you with is consider the weather. And I mean, actually consider the wind.
I think this is going to come up for us when we really start getting into the event as well. But the idea then also is, because it is fully self-supported, but you were going to be doing this event with Tom, but it also then
Yeah.
involved plotting your route to those 8 checkpoints, because the start and finish is in Blainville, Seron, right near Caen. And you're right. I mean, you could, if you were a masochist, I guess, decide, or a sadist, decide to go zigzag and connect the checkpoints in a really long adventure. But there is a logical flow and there is a circle to it in how you do it. But going clockwise or anti-clockwise is a decision you have to make. Because you were signed up as a team of 2, who was in charge of the route planning? Did you share that?
Yeah, we did that together. We actually did our own planning, each of us. And then we just thought we just throw it together and see who's got the better route. But more or less the routes were the same because we were using the same checkpoints. Anyway, so yeah, I need to say, I think I forgot that. It starts in the night at 10 o'clock. So you actually cycle into the night, into the first night. Yeah.
You're right. And now I want to know, because there were 2 things that I didn't know when I signed up for this event. One was that it started at 10 o'clock at night. I had no idea of that until after I signed up. And the second one was that there was, to be an official finisher, you had 73 hours to complete the course. Did you know either of those 2 before signing up?
I think I knew both of them. I'm not so sure about the 10 o'clock thing, though.
Yeah, I certainly didn't. Because that was a big, poo my pants moment, for lack of a better word, when I found that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, you need to prepare for that, don't you?
Absolutely. How did you prepare for the night portion of the event?
Yeah, actually, well, we were meant to go together. So we actually took off like to accommodate the fatigue. We started off like on a Friday night after a full day of work or a full week of work. Tried to find places to sleep at, to bivouac in the night, which is a lot different to finding a place during daytime. It was a funny thing though. We did one overnighter and we thought we had found a fantastic spot. The next day we learned that was actually in the middle of a garden of someone's house. There was no fence, but it was the garden of it was more or less a castle, something like that. So big gardens, big like trees and big meadow, and even a small lake, which we didn't see, but like the muzzies were, disturbing us a little bit in the night. Yeah, so we would never have slept there if we would have gone there during daytime.
In the cover of darkness, it felt like the perfect spot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really hard to find a good place to sleep at when you're not used to that. And I'm not saying that I could find the best places right now, because clearly I can't. Yeah, and what we also did was some solo rides to get your brains into or preparing yourself that you can do it, or motivate yourself. Yeah, you need to go long, definitely, and also doing longer rides 2 or 3 days in a row to do that.
What was the longest sort of solo ride or what was the longest training ride that you did leading up to the event?
I think that the longest solo ride was, I was visiting a friend in Cologne, and that was 180 one day and 200 the other day. So I didn't go the same route back and forth. So that was probably the longest solo rides.
I guess also because you were saying that you didn't take the same route back and forth, did you also, were you training on familiar roads, or did you add that into your training as well to test yourself on riding in unusual and unfamiliar terrain?
Oh yeah, I did. We did that. I really I think I have the feeling I know every stone around here. So we actually prefer going some distance by train. and then doing some round courses in unknown terrain. And it's most of the area here is flat or more or less flat. And to do some hills and that, you need to drive a little further.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's good to cover the plains and the flats with a train and just start 30 or 40K off. Yeah.
Because certainly as well, like from my experience with Normandy, whilst I couldn't name you a specific climb in Normandy, I couldn't tell you, I don't think there's mountains in Normandy. But my experience of Normandy is I feel like there's really no flat roads there. Because it was either up or down for me. I was on a roller coaster road. If I wasn't going up, I was going down, and I knew when I was going. In fact, there was a section on day 2 which I nicknamed the roller coaster. It was the roller coaster when I was traveling east to west to get to the 7th checkpoint, and it just felt I was perpetually going downhill for 500 meters at -5%, uphill for 500 meters at +5%, and that lasted forever. So were you aware that the terrain in Normandy was going to be that sort of up and down type of terrain?
No. Well, if you plan your routes on Komoot or something, you see actually the altitude, but still, I thought it was more flat. I was quite surprised that I think the area you describe is named the Normandy Swiss or Swiss Normandy, something like that.
Swiss Normand, yeah. Oh, I had moments in Swiss Normand. This is not my story, but that's where it nearly fell apart for me before the roller coaster section.
Yeah, same with me. And it was totally unexpected for me that actually I did 3,000 meters in altitude that day.
Yeah.
I think that the second day was the long day for all of us. I think I did 320K and 3,000 meters of altitude. So for me, that is,
I live in the Pyrenees, and it's even my flattest ride that I could do here involves some form of climbing. But to me, personally for me, and everyone is different, but personally for me, if you do a ride of 100 kilometers and you have 1,000 meters of elevation, it's a fairly hilly ride. Now, obviously, I live in the mountains and I could add quite a lot of elevation in 100 kilometres, but I generally stick to just one mountain at a time if I can. But with Normandy, it nearly ended up being just over 900 kilometres and just under 9,000 metres of climbing. And so for an area that's not really well known for its hilliness, it was certainly lumpy. So, Stevie, when I first met you, and I have vivid recollections because I was as nervous as can be. This was my very first event, and I remember scanning around and looking, and sign-in was it was a very casual event. If people want to do an event where you don't feel any pressure from the event itself, turn up to Normandicat because it's really casual. And if you like something that's more structured, maybe don't turn up to Normandicat because it doesn't have that. And I remember turning up, I was really nervous. I had planned to go clockwise, and while I was waiting for event numbers and registration to open, there was a group of, I think, 6 French people. And I remember speaking in my broken French to them, hello, introducing myself, this crazy Australian trying to do this. And they were going, oh, which way are you going? And I said, clockwise. And they were like, why are you going that way? Like the wind. And I was like, the weather forecast says that it should be good that way. Like, I should finish with a tailwind. No, you're going the wrong way. And so I remember going back to my car broken because I wasn't bivvying and I was locked into where I had to stay, which is a story for another show. But I remember then, panicked and nervous and looking around and going, aren't there any other women? And then I saw you there and I was like, oh my gosh, yay, look, there's another woman. And Stevie, I was looking at you and I was thinking, wow, I must admit, I was looking at you feeling psyched out. Not that you were psyching me out. You were just doing your thing. But I was like, wow, look at this awesome woman. She's turned up here. She doesn't even have anyone with her. She's on her own and she's just rocking up to this event. I'm here with my husband who's supporting me and I'm an absolute mess. And then we fast forward to the start line and then, we're sort of all nervous. I think all the participants are trying to work out how exactly does this work. Are we taking photos of checkpoints? And the organisers aren't being very instructive with their instructions, or maybe they are, but with our understanding of French, it was lost to us.
Yeah, I think that was the challenge.
And you and I sort of nervously, said, hi, good race. And then we set off, and within the first few kilometres we were side by side, and I just remember my first few hours of that race were transformed because you were there. But Stevie, you had planned to do that ride with your husband Tom, but he wasn't there. What happened?
Yeah. So I had a very, very, challenging day because, it didn't come totally unprepared, but his ex-wife had died exactly that day. And he learned about that during, it was about 12 o'clock lunchtime. And he promised to his daughter and his son to come back immediately if that happens. And so he booked himself a train ticket. I drove him to Caen 4 hours before, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He took the train home, and I was there completely devastated. We went there with our camper van, so I was at the campground. I was just going to say playground, but it was campground, and I was completely gone. So we had packed everything, we had checked everything, and then the message came. So, and for me, I was relying on him in so many ways, and so we planned to do that together. And if you have a mechanical, he could fix it. I can fix everything, so I know that. I can fix a flat tire, but that's about it. And also, mentally, if you're having a down, the other one can cheer you up, and vice versa. So doing that alone, that scenario is just so different from doing something like that you do the first time on your own. So it's, bivvying. We planned bivvying, so we haven't booked anything. So we planned bivvying and maybe finding a hotel for the second night. So yeah, I was really nervous, and I don't speak French that well. So, and good that you say that, because I didn't get a single word of the briefing.
No, I have it recorded, and I still don't know what they said. I don't want to feel bad to the organisers. It was a great event. And it was probably my nerves, but Stevie, I can't even imagine to put myself in your shoes. Like, what? This is literally hours before. You have your bikes and everything ready to go as a team of two, and you have a decision to make whether you'll continue. Did you actually consider not starting?
Yeah, I had, the worst roller coaster I had that day before actually taking off. So that was the emotional roller coaster. I was considering, no one would even know that I'm not turning up. So I don't have the pressure. Tom's not there. I could just just not do it. And then I said, why? You've trained, you're prepared, your bike is there, it's all packed. You have all the bags there, you have the food, you have everything ready. So there's no point in not going. Of course you can do it. Just trust in yourself. And again, at that day, retrospectively, it's just the worst and the biggest mountain is just in yourself. It's in your head. It's not in your legs. It's not in the bike. It's just in your head. And once you just get there, everything will turn out fine. And actually, having met you there, that actually, it was like having wings. And you're very right. I think if I was there with Tom, we wouldn't have met in the way we have met finally. But meeting you and doing the first hours together, and maybe we need to tell that it started to rain, to get very windy, to get to pour actually.
It was. Do you remember? I'm trying to remember. It was just before checkpoint 2. Checkpoint 2 came very quickly in the piece. It was the Merville battery.
Yeah.
And then checkpoint 1 was Merville battery. Checkpoint 2 was the
lighthouse.
The lighthouse.
Yeah.
Getting to that, I remember actually you were telling me that you were giving me a bit of a briefing about what had happened, and I was like, wow, oh my gosh, you're doing this solo. And then I heard you were bivvying, and I was like, wow, have you bivvied before? Yeah, but with Tom, have you bivvied solo? I don't think you had you?
No, never.
All right. And I was just thinking, my gosh, this woman is just amazing. But I remember also, Stevie, at one point getting to that lighthouse, Fer de la Roche, I think it is.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be this amazing viewing point where you can see over the Seine and you can see the Pont de Normandie, or the Normandy Bridge.
Yes.
Which is quite spectacular. But it was it was nighttime, so we couldn't really see much, but we couldn't even see the lights because it was just pouring with rain and really, really windy.
Oh.
I remember getting to a point just before we reached the lighthouse where we both of us, we just stopped under the shelter of a tree. There was another participant who was sort of going back and forth with us. I think we were faster than him overall, but we had to stop a few times and he would overtake us.
Yeah.
And he stopped there as well. I never saw him again. I never saw him for the rest of the event. I don't even know if he finished. But I was questioning my life choices under that tree because it was not meant to be wet. It was meant to be a beautiful, mild night.
Yeah.
I didn't think we were meant to have a headwind, and we did. And it was just like, oh my goodness.
It was headwinds all over the time. I have no idea. The weather forecast and the actual weather were so unmatched. So I think, was it rain in the forecast at all? Maybe a little bit on the second day. But it was not windy, not rainy. It was just like a little chilly, but it was just so different than expected.
Stevie, something else that you were telling me on this crazy night was we were talking about our coping strategies of coping in the dark. And I think I had shared that I was going to be listening to podcasts. I was listening to like Jenny Graham's Round the World podcast because I could listen to her beautiful voice telling me that story all the time. You were going to be listening to an audiobook, and I remember your choice of audiobook to me was quite... Can you just tell our listeners what you had chosen?
Actually, there's a sort of a serial of Normandy murder novels, and I chose audiobooks, which are just happening where you actually are. So it's taking place, most of the time it's Deauville or nearby. And that novel I was listening to was actually happening along the Seine. And that was where the route actually went inland from the coast to Paris. We were doing like ups and downs nearby the misty riverbanks of the Seine. And there was very bad murder series going on in some little village. We actually did go through that village, the two of us.
You were telling me about that as we were going through the village, because I remember, probably nervous me, I was trying to say the names of the villages how the French might pronounce them. Was it like Honfleur?
Yeah.
And I keep thinking of Ranches, but maybe I'm incorrect there. And I remember there was a village, you go, oh yes, this is where the murders take place. And we're cycling, it's pitch dark, pouring with rain and howling wind. And I'm like, why are you listening to a murder book about where murders are taking place? You're bivvying. Like
that's maybe my ironic way of keeping up with situations. I don't know. I might think, no, this is just happening in murder novels. This is not happening to you. This is just happens in books and films and all that. So it's maybe a bit stupid, but
maybe I need to seek this book out now too. You know that weird sensation where you've travelled somewhere, and so then if you see it on TV or something, you have these memories that are more affectionate about seeing it again. Maybe I'll read the murder novel and think, oh yeah, that's where Stevie and I had to cycle through the main Centreville and then take a right turn up a 15% cobbled gradient in the wet. I really remember that as well.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Multispective, the new podcast that brings you stories unheard of. We talk about bank robbers.
Roughly half of the people who do it get caught, so can I find a way to be in the half that doesn't get caught? The answer was yes, and then once I experienced my first robbery, it was exciting.
Toxic cults.
This cult which made you feel like you were part of something important, like a revolution.
Drug addiction and recovery.
I told my dad, if you don't send him to rehab, he's gonna die. He's gonna die because of you.
Even brain surgery.
I woke up and I had a helmet on, and I would sleep, but I had wires that were going deep into my brain.
Tune in now to Multispective on www.multispective.org or on your preferred podcasting app.
Let's just say those Frenchmen at the start line had the weather right. The locals knew what was going on, but
Yeah.
the Australian and the German who turned up had no clue. And we're going the wrong way because even though it was a circle, for 3 days I felt like I had a headwind for and I shouldn't have. I should have had a tailwind somewhere, but I never did.
Yeah.
But those first few hours for me with you, Stevie, really changed. They calmed me down. But how did you go? Because I left you early then. in the morning. I think we shared probably the first 4 hours, maybe 5 hours together, and then you were starting to get sleepy.
Exactly.
I wasn't bivvying, so I was riding through the entire night. And I remember leaving you were like, I'm sleepy now, Bella. Okay, Stevie, let's find a place where you can bivvy. And I was like in solidarity with this awesome solo female who's never bivvied on their own and in a foreign country. We're trying to find a safe. And I think we found like a church cemetery. And that's where I said goodbye to you, not realising I wouldn't see you again during the event. What were you thinking when I finally left and you were bivvying? What was the bivvy experience like?
Well, I was just so exhausted. I could not go any further because I think that mental roller coaster during the day before the race, actually that drained me so much. So I really had to sleep. And I actually didn't stay at the place where we both split. I was driving into the middle of that tiny town where there was a big church and a parking space and a bus stop. And actually the bus stop was my bivvy spot. I thought that was the best place. I didn't find much sleep, but at least I was lying down. I was having my air bed out. I was testing all my stuff and all that, and that was fine. So I think I had a very well. Actually, once I laid down, I had to go up to pee again, and that actually kept me from sleeping. And when I was falling asleep again, I had to get up again, pee again. And I think when that happened the third time, I thought to myself, okay, now I just stay up. I keep moving. I get moving again.
Find a coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Get a coffee, get some pastries. And yeah, but like having that second day, that was so lonely. And especially after like we two split up because we had so much to tell to each other. So I was listening to podcasts. I was trying to picture nice and sunny weathers, which we actually planned riding in, but it wasn't the case. It was grey, it was headwind, it was cold, and it was just not like planned at all. And then it was that bank holiday day, and the fourth checkpoint was in Versailles, which is very near to Paris, and it was a bank holiday, so everything was packed with cars, everything was packed with people. And once I reached Versailles and Paris, I was thinking, okay, solitude is something lovely. I want to go outside. I want to go outside of this crazy big city and its surroundings again. And yeah, but wasn't the headwind the worst experience of the whole race?
It was, I think, because it just kept eating away mentally at me. Like, I had some training days leading up to the race, like with my training plan, which involved riding in the headwind. And I remember thinking at that point, okay, this is going to hold me in good stead mentally. But there's just something about a headwind that just mentally takes over me. And it's like it just eats away at your spirit and your soul. And you just have to keep pushing forward. And you're tired. Because Versailles, that was one of the biggest challenges for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because Versailles came in at for me it was 300 kilometres and I hadn't stopped in the night. And I still had another 85 kilometres before I would get to where I was stopping. And I remember being around there and lots of like people trying to sell me tacky like Eiffel Tower chain rinket rings. And I was like, I just have to be here to take my stupid photo and get going.
Yeah.
Versailles was I think a tired low moment, especially navigating through Paris. For me, day 2 was where I felt like it fell apart. And was day 2 most challenging day for you, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think Versailles was, and especially the way up Versailles was the worst thing I experienced during those 3 days. I was in very, very bad traffic, and actually commute. I don't know what happened to the route planning, but I found myself at some big heavily trafficked road. It felt like a motorway. It was like three ways in one direction or something like that.
Stevie, it was a motorway because I was on that road too, and I did my route with Komoot, and thank you, Komoot. That was
yeah.
But I was like, I don't want to be here, but I don't know how else to go. And I think that like the peripherique that goes around Paris was coming onto a motorway where we were
Yes.
riding on it.
Yes.
And it's not a place for bikes. It's
No.
not where you want to be.
Not at all.
It felt really good to get away from Versailles and to leave Paris behind.
Yeah.
But day two broke me. I saw a sign for Caen, which was 30 kilometres away, because even though the whole distance was 913, because it's a circle, I could have headed inland and just said, you know what, I'm scratching, I'm pulling the pin and I'm leaving this behind. And I stopped and looked at that sign and considered my life choices and considered whether or not I wanted to continue. Did you have any doubts during the race about getting to the finish line?
I think I doubted to get to the finish line in time, especially on the last day or the day before. Was it the second day? Can't remember. Was it? No, the second and the third day, more or less. Because after that Versailles experience, I went to a hotel. I was arriving there at nighttime, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the nighttime. It was some self-booking thing. No one at the reception, and just like going in with a coat and all that. And I slept immediately when my head touched the pillow. I was asleep. I was really, really finished by more or less not sleeping the first night and driving so many kilometers. And yeah. And then the next day, I had a good night of sleep, 6 or 7 hours, tight sleep. But that next day, that just took me ages to get moving. Headwind. That was the day with the 3,000 altitude meters as well in the Swiss Normandy, Swiss, whatever. Back to the coast. And then I did a planning error, actually. I planned 10K too much north, I believe. So I thought that I didn't really watch the coordinates. I just picked some point of interest, something like that, on the route planning. And that was the error. So I landed up 10K north of Brickville. So I had to go south 10K and had to go back 10K. And that was actually the worst period of time of having that 20 useless kilometers to ride.
Yeah, and actually, I know the area that you would have been riding north, and it was roller coaster territory still as
Again,
well.
yeah.
And it was, for me, I was there on the evening of the second day, and it felt really busy with traffic as well.
Yeah.
I remember vividly distracting myself. I had WhatsApp messages coming through from friends wishing me well and whatnot, and I think telling me to eat more Percy pigs or something. But I remember that so vividly. But yeah, I couldn't imagine. That would be like a big kick in the guts to think I've got to cycle back 10 kilometers and then ride it again.
It's not that much, but
to take a photo to send it to someone, and I'm not even sure if I'm sending it correctly.
Especially taking a photo of yourself with some coordinates in pitch blackness. So it was dark by that time. It was about 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the night.
It could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
But true to you, Stevie, you could have just said, well, it's pitch black, I'm going, but you stayed to the route and you did this event correctly, so I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I am proud of myself as well.
So you know what, we talk about low moments. What was the high moment for you of Normandicat?
I think that was related also to the most emotional moment, and that was the other phare at near
Fair de Jury.
Fair de Jury. What was it called again?
Yeah. Fair de Jury.
Yes,
well,
this one.
I'm saying it as an Australian speaking French. When I read it in English, it's Fair de Jury.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's Phare de Jury, or maybe it is Phare de Jury.
I think it's Phare de Jury.
If there's any French listeners in my podcast, please let me know. Is it Jury or Jury? Anyway, it's the lighthouse right near, right on the western coast.
Exactly.
Right on the western tip of Normandy, as far as you could go west.
And that is the most beautiful spot I've ever seen during these 900 kilometers to ride. And that was just so emotional for me because that area around there looked like Ireland. The sun was up. It was getting a little warmer because if the sun was there, the sky was blue, the sea was blue, and that fantastic lighthouse in the middle of the sea. It's on a very little tiny rocky island, and it's just so nice. And I knew by then that it was still like 200K to go, but I knew, okay, I'd be fine. I was there quite early in the morning, and I'd be back in Blainville-sur-Mer sometime in the afternoon. So by then I knew I could do it. And so that was fine. I was actually crying.
I cried there too. I had a real emotional moment at that lighthouse. I was there just after sun had started rising, and it was, like you said, it reminded me so vividly of Ireland. In fact, the Cotentin Peninsula there is known as Little Ireland, and there were beautiful pink wildflowers on these tiny little lanes with, stone walls and, beautiful meadows out to the sea.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a spiritual moment, because that was my first experience of actual sunshine for the race, for the event, because up to then it was just perpetual headwind and rain or drizzle, and there was no great views because the clouds were so low. But
yeah,
for me that was a moment too, like just seeing the sunrise and the lighthouse. I remember being really emotional.
Oh yeah.
I don't know whether myself I was convinced I was making it at that stage, because I was also in full on saddle sore hell. Which we'll leave as well, but yeah, what a moment, what a high moment. And like you said, there's still actually quite a distance to go, to get to the finish, and you have to retrace your steps in, because it's a one-way road in and out too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is mentally
and steep.
Yeah, it's hard to do that, and exactly, you need to go back the very same way you just came up there. And it's such a pity, because we must have missed each other by like 3/4 of an hour to an hour or something like that. So we must have nearly met again. So you were there a little in front of me, and yeah, we didn't meet. We met at the finish line. Yeah, finisher party. Yay.
I remember being there and thinking, it was the first sort of time that I actually started tracking other people's dots. I had people telling me about dots were around me where I was in the race, but I remember being there thinking, hang on, where's Stevie? I want to see her dot, and where is she? Because I knew that no one was there for you, and I didn't want you to turn up at the finish line on your own. I remember looking at it and just saying, okay, I'm tired, but I'm here for Stevie. And I remember seeing you come in. I was just so happy. I think I was happy seeing you cross the line than I was for me. I think for me, I had relief. I could finally get off my bike, but I just had sheer happiness seeing you cross the line.
Oh, I was so delighted to see you again, sitting there with all the English-speaking guys, which I have never met or seen before in the race. And I thought to that stage, there were only French people around, and nothing against French, but I just can't speak French. Like, I have no conversational French. I can say oui and non, and I can order beer and stuff, but I can't really run a conversation. And that was just so nice, meeting all these guys sitting there. I actually saw another woman. There were actually 3 women in the whole race. There weren't that many people, about 60, 70, 80 maybe, and 3 women.
Well, yeah, although I still don't know, because this is part of Normandicat. There's no official results put up anywhere, sort of, so who knows? Because I have looked at this before. There were definitely more women signed up, but I only ever saw 3 of us. So I don't know if only 3 of us started, or if 3 of us started at 10 o'clock. Maybe there were more that started later and just finished later. I don't know. Sure. But yeah, there were only 3 of us there that I know of, which is not uncommon. It was because, unfortunately, in ultras, even though women are geared for ultra endurance and doing well in cycling and ultra endurance events, there's still just not enough of us at the start line.
Yeah, which is a pity. I think it's that mental wall that I also put up before something like that. That's something that keeps a lot of women of doing stuff like we do or we've done. It's a pity. We can do that. We just have to trust ourselves.
Yeah.
And trust the strength that we have, because we have strength being a woman.
Quite a lot. And for endurance events, it gets to a stage where your genetics or your gender doesn't matter so much, because we can fuel for these events, and our metabolism is, as a female, we're primed for it as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of fueling and metabolism, what was your recovery like after finishing Normandicat?
That was quite funny. I was at that campground again, in our caravan, and I was mentally, well, my body was drained, but mentally I was sort of at a 0 point. I couldn't run a full thought. I was getting up to do something, and once I got up, I didn't know where I was up to. So I was strange situations when you just like you're not fully awake, but you're tired, but you can't sleep all the time, and you just eat something. I was very hungry, of course. Then I ate something, then I fell back to sleep, and then I was half waking up again, and then I fell back to sleep. And I think the day after, so the second day after the race, that was the day I really was able to think about what I did. And when it all settled down, what I was doing 3 days on my own, bivvying, doing an ultracycling. And well, it's not the transcontinental, but I can still call myself an ultracyclist. So can you, Bella?
You know, and no one can take that away from you either, Stevie. But like for me, I also think I'm mentally trained for this event, knowing I would be on my own. Your training was that you were never doing this event on your own, and a few hours just before taking to the start line to have to all of a sudden go into solo mode. I just have such enormous respect for you, Stevie. I really do. You can take so much confidence into whatever event you choose from here, knowing that at that sort of emotional roller coaster, especially the series of events leading up to you being on your own on the start line, and you still stuck through it and did it.
Yeah.
Including 20 kilometres extra on the course. Just, in Australia, we would say just for shits and giggles. But So Stevie, what was your biggest learning from Normandicat? Like, you completed it. What's the biggest takeaway?
Trust in yourself, or I can trust in myself. Even if I think I can't do things, I still learned that I can do a lot of things. So yeah, I learned to trust in myself, and I think the biggest learning is also to put that into my everyday life. And any challenge that came up after that, also like work-wise, has gotten, well, if I say smaller, I might not be fair, but it has gotten smaller because I know I can endure so many things. That is, yeah, trust in your mental strength and trust in your body. You can do it.
It's such a big confidence boost, isn't it? To pick something that's a massive challenge that most people can't comprehend. And actually, having done it myself, I remember we would text about this for months afterwards. Stevie, you did it. Bella, you did it. Can you believe it? No, not yet. Do you believe you did it yet? No. And actually, while we're talking about recovery, one of the weird things that I never realised would happen is the puffiness, the post-event puffiness. And when I mean puffiness, I mean everything was swollen. Yeah. My eyes were puffy, my face was puffy, my legs were puffy. Were you the same?
Yeah.
I think you were.
Yeah, definitely.
Why does that happen? I'd love to know if there's any listeners who can tell me what physiologically is happening to our bodies that create us to be these big puffy things. I'd love to know. I don't think it's just lack of sleep. There's something physiological going on there.
Yeah, I think it's the recovery of the muscles, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so someone else needs to tell us.
Is ultracycling, is that a box you've ticked now, or have you got your mind cast on another event, and maybe even with Tom?
The next big event, so yes, I'm totally into these ultracycling events now. I've listened to the Trans-Pyrenees podcast, I've listened to the Transcontinental podcast, and I love it. I really, really love it. And the next ultracycling event, if you will, is our mini sabbatical, which we have planned for summer this year. And if everything goes right, I will see my lovely friend Bella in the Pyrenees. So the plan is to go from home to the Alps, to cross Mont Ventoux and go to the Pyrenees, take the ferry to Ireland, then go to Ireland, visit another friend, and then go to Wales, and then go back home. And I think, well, I hope we don't need to do a shortcut, because we're totally underestimated the distances which we can do in 2 months' time. But yeah, I can't wait until summer.
Stevie, I can't wait to record another session and find out all about this trip. In fact, I'm secretly thinking when you're here in the Pyrenees, I might just have to hitchhike and make it a team of 3 and make my way over to Ireland and cycle over there with you. It's when I was there, we were in lockdown, and there's so much of that country I wanted to ride in that I never got to, so it would be quite tempting. I'll try not to gate crash your party too much.
That's probably the story for the next podcast then.
Absolutely. Oh,
Fantastic cliffhanger.
I'm locking you in for a future episode. So, Stevie, how could people follow along with what you do online? I know that you have a bit of a social media presence and you do some things, and they are in your native language in German. But if people want to follow along with your adventures and keep track of you, how can they do that?
So we have a YouTube channel, which is called Tom und Stevie on Tour. It's the German saying Tom and Stevie on tour. Well, unfortunately, it's all in German, but at least, well, you can see what we're doing. Some of the overnighters. I actually recorded some ski tourings as well, but most of it is the cycling. And we've got a film for the Ironman as well.
I've been watching them, even though I don't know what you say, but I feel what you're doing. Fangirl moment. If for some reason Tom and Stevie, whether both of you feel like doing an English-speaking episode, let me know. I'm going to link to your channel, your YouTube channel, in the show notes anyway, so that people can keep track of you, because I find that what you both do as a team too is fascinating. It aligns with what I like doing when I'm on my bike, training for these sort of crazy events as well. So if you have a mind set to doing these sort of things, I think it's good to see what other people are doing, because it sort of shows you a bit of the way, but also shows you there's other people doing the same thing, and you feel like you're part of a community out there somewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Gosh, Stevie, I want to talk with you for ages, but I know we can't forever. There are two questions I always like to finish my show off with, and you probably know them, but I'm going to ask you anyway. The first is, if you had the choice to cycle up a constant climb or have to ride into a constant headwind, which one are you choosing?
The climb, definitely. Especially after Normandicat.
Actually, in Normandicat, we sort of had both, didn't we?
Yeah.
We were always climbing and it was always a headwind.
Yeah, but I prefer the climb from the headwind. I just don't like winds at all.
And now, this one's an interesting one, because normally when I speak with my guests, I feel like I know what the answer to this one's going to be, but I'm not 100% sure with you, so I'm interested to hear. If you have the choice of riding for 4 hours in a day, and you could ride on your own or ride with other people for 4 hours, which one are you choosing?
That's quite hard to say. Actually, I like social rides a lot, but sometimes I use the cycling to be on my own, with my own, and just go from one place to the other, like leave work behind, for example, and go into the weekend. And I facilitate this by doing a solo ride. So I need both, depends on my situation.
Do you think, this is a follow-up question, maybe it's not fair, but I'm asking anyway. Do you think, having had that experience of doing Normandicat on your own, do you think you would ever sign up for an event on your own?
Yeah, why not? I'm not scared anymore of doing things on my own.
The Trans-Pyrenees.
Oh.
I know, my calendar's full, unfortunately, for this year, but I have to say, if I was signing up for something again, that is the one that's got my heartstrings for obvious reasons.
Yeah, that's not the easiest one. I was actually thinking of the Trans-Pyrenees, but it's quite a hard one. For you, it's just in front of your door.
It is. We're on the route. We're very close to it. I think that makes it scarier, because I actually know what's coming.
Yeah, sometimes it's not good when you know exactly what's coming your way.
Yeah, like it was good for me to just prepare thinking that I'd have a tailwind somewhere in Normandy and it would be dead flat, right? Stevie, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've loved hearing about more of your experience, and it's reminded me of my own as well. And I'm going to say this again. Stevie, you did it.
Hey,
you
Bella,
are an ultra-cyclist.
You are a Normandicat finisher as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh my gosh, Stevie, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bella. Hear you soon.
If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and review. It really helps the podcast to grow and reach a wider audience. Also, feel free to share it with others and post about it on your social media. Lastly, do you have your own story you'd like to share with us? Then please get in touch by sending an email to podcast@seektravelride.com and request to be featured as a guest on the show. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.